Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the COSP series on sustainability. Today, we have the amazing Saskia Wilson-Brown of the Institute for Art and Olfaction. Would you mind giving us a brief introduction of regarding all the wonderful things you do in your cool life?
Let me find my cool life. Thanks, Mauricio. So I run the Institute for Art and Olfaction. We're based in Los Angeles, but we operate as much as possible internationally where we can, and definitely across California. And the Institute is a nonprofit I started in 2012, devoted to experimentation and access in the field of perfumery. And in order to fulfill that mission, we operate in sort of three verticals. The first is education and access. So that's really very basic accessibility things, making sure the materials are accessible to people who are curious about them, doing a lot of education these days, a lot more education than we started with, but having open labs, things like that. And then the second is experimentation. And for that, we typically work with artists or institutions or other, or perfumers to incorporate scent into more experimental practices. So it could be an art installation or a DJ set, whatever it is. And yeah, that's kind of the stuff that we sort of started really wanting to devote ourselves to, although that's transitioned a bit. And then the third is advocacy, which sounds a little arrogant, but what I mean by that is just making sure that we're doing our part to raise the visibility of independent practices. And we do that through a number of programs, including an awards mechanism that we run, programs like the Experimental Scent Summit, which is sort of like, I don't know, it's like a summit of people talking about experimental practices with scent. And then the biennial scent fair, which is just what it sounds like, a scent fair. It's biennial. And then we just recently launched a whole online component in response, of course, to coronavirus or COVID-19.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's maybe a lot.
Wonderful. Would you mind sharing how you personally define sustainability?
Sure. I feel like a chump because I'm repeating stuff I said this morning, but that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just broke the third wall. I define sustainability as okay. So I mean, there's the obvious answer, which is making sure that you're doing implementing practices that are sustainable, that help us not destroy our planet and our resources and so on. So that's definitely how I would define it at first blush. But then beyond that, I think it's really sustainability ties in also to sort of how we deal with consumption and the big C, capitalism. So for me, sustainability is not just about sort of helping the planet, but it's also about helping sort of undo the damage done by this sort of Western style rampant capitalism that we're also enmeshed in. To me, they're really part and parcel of the same thing, because you can't fix one without addressing the other, really. So it's a little looser maybe than just ecological sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you this morning. We had some technical difficulties earlier.
We did.
My question is, how has your personal definition of sustainability changed over the years?
But I think it's evolved into what I just said. But I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and I went to Berkeley. So, I mean, certainly I was raised with this sort of awareness of the, save the planet. And my generation, I think, was the first generation. Well, no, it's not true. Was the second generation really to take that on as sort of a rallying cry, And when I was a kid, I understood sustainability as like, greenhouse gases reduction, But I never, until I started really the Institute, or actually until right before I started the Institute, I really never connected sort of that awareness of how to help the planet with the reality of sort of the system we're in, you know what I mean? So I think my concept of sustainability has evolved from to be a little bit more, or I guess my concept of how to address issues of sustainability has evolved into being a little bit more wide ranging and more about sort of rethinking how we consume in general, you know, and everything that goes into that, you know, which is a lot.
Yeah, we all had an epiphany today that we were all raised Catholic. And I bring that up because we all realize that when it comes to consuming ourselves, consuming and producing, like there's a lot of guilt around that. You know, Maurizio was joking, maybe we should be called the guilt of sustainable perfumery. And because I think that, you know, if you really care about sustainability, then of course the question is, why are we making these scents? Like, you know, nobody really needs perfume, but we're all obviously super passionate about it. And so I guess like our general, I mean, one of the reasons that we founded this group and one of our biggest questions that we're trying to get the answer at is like, do you think that sustainability, like, is this something that you see being addressed in the fragrance industry? Are we alone here with this guilt? Or like, do you think it's kind of?
I don't think you're alone. I don't think you're alone in that guilt. And you know, before I answer your question, I mean, I just my little. I was raised by a dad who was a Catholic, by the way, but he was also he was an art administrator for the city of LA. So he had sort of a political role in the arts, which is bizarre. And you know, he would come under all this fire from various people saying, "Well, you know, you're diverging budgets to art. You know, there's more important things to deal with." And so anything I say is really taught by him. But like, look, art matters. You know what I mean? Like, part of creating a sustainable future is also making sure that we're happy and we're able to express ourselves. I mean, it's a human right. So that's how I deal with my own guilt, you know, is like art matters and therefore perfume is an art and therefore perfume matters. Having said that, I think the way the perfume industry deals with the product up until fairly recently has been, you know, I mean, shameful is a strong word, but I mean, it's definitely not something that that we can all be proud of, you know, that bajillions of bottles of like whatever stuff at Sephora, you know, just all of it being consumed. And I think industry wide, I think there's definitely more of an awareness of this than there was. Having said that, the industry is broken up so much into so many little groups, you know, like there's so many little groups in this larger industry. There's the mainstream people, but even within that, there's all these little subgroups, and there's the independents, but even within that, there's all these little subgroups. So I don't think that by and large, everybody has the same commitment to it that maybe you guys do, you know, and that's a pity. But I do think people are more and more aware of it. Even the super fancy, you know, perfume is like luxury, most expensive perfume in the world. People are at least looking at it a little bit, you know, more than they would have maybe
so?
10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, that's my diplomatic position. I think the reality is my experience is, you know, I walk into the 8th floor of Harrods in London and they're not worried about that, man. They're just worrying about glamour and gold and diamante and how to sell dreams and, you know, no hate, you know, they're entitled to their practice, but it definitely doesn't feel future facing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this.
That led into a question that I had specifically, which was kind of around in terms of what sustainability looks like right now in the industry, because there is a lot of CSR that's going on and some of it is behind the scenes. And there's a lot of it where there isn't like a lot of third-party assessment, and you have to dig to kind of find out like what's going on in terms of like bigger fragrance houses. And like, again, you were saying you go into Harrods, it's like there's no indication of like what do they have, like different sustainability policies, like what does that look like? You can clearly tell from the packaging that like not really in a lot of cases. And like for your, like what would sustainability look like? Like that's what it is now. But like best case scenario, like in terms of industry sustainability, like how would you paint that picture?
You know, it's super tricky because I've had the fortune or misfortune, depending on the day, of spending time, you know, with sort of the fancy people, as I describe. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, the people that are producing that stuff that goes up into the 8th floor of Harrods. And there's this problem that people talk about this stuff, you know, and I see people launching brands, and the first thing they're always saying is, "Oh, I need to make it look professional. You know, my perfume needs to like look professional so that I can make it to poor Harrods, we're picking on Harrods, but whatever, you know, Nordstrom or whatever, you know. And part of that professionalism is you have your box and you have your plastic stuff on the box, and in the box there's this plastic insert, and in that insert there's this foam and the perfume's in that, you know. There's all this shit that goes into being professional that is totally unnecessary. You know, it's just because that's how it looks professional to the mainstream, and it allows them to sell their perfume better as a real perfume, you know. But that's I think the thing that needs to change, and I think that's where the independents and the artisans really come in, is that you can change the aesthetic of what perfume looks like, luxury looks like, even if you want to go there, and make it sustainable. But that is a big cultural shift that, I mean, really honestly, from my perspective, I don't see happening quickly. Although, having said that, a lot of these big fragrance houses and a lot of the sort of high-end niche, you know, are looking to what's happening in particular, because I'm here in California, I'm getting the questions, you know, so people are certainly paying attention to what's happening out here, you know, Colorado counts, the greater West, you know, and that gives me hope, because that means that they'll start seeing that there are these more responsible practices, you know, and generalizing broadly, I think that the American artisans tend to be more responsible when it comes to this stuff than you're given, you know, super high-end luxury Italian perfumer, perfume brand, for instance. So I don't know if that answered your question. I'm sorry, Molly. I just went off on a...
Yeah, no, it was it was great. Thank you.
Okay.
And part of it was like, are you seeing a shift? Because you're saying people are starting to they're starting to pay attention.
They're starting to pay attention, and then I'm seeing a shift. I mean, I just know what I see, you know, and I know what people email me about, and I am getting increasing emails from fragrance houses, you know, from the fancy people asking about, like, well, what's going on out there? Like, we want to know about cool brands. And so I think if suddenly people are paying attention, then that's going to trigger a shift, because inevitably they're going to try to subsume and copy, and, you know, I mean, and it, on the one hand, it's cool. On the other hand, it can be sinister. Like when Starbucks did these like localized coffee houses, and you're like, okay, like you're just taking the language of localization and sustainability, but actually you're just doing the same old shit. You know what I mean?
Sick.
And that's where I think we have to really keep an eye on it. Yeah. So that's my long-winded answer to a simple question. Sorry.
Sorry, if I could dovetail off of that, and build off of Molly's question, what would and then potentially we might be jumping ahead here, but what would what types of resources do you believe that independent perfumers and makers would need to make those kinds of more sustainable decisions?
You know, I can only speak from the perspective of for myself, you know, so I run this organization, and in the organization, we have things that we do that we have to do as part of our operations that are not sustainable. For instance, the Art and Olfaction Awards, you know, we get the bottles in, we have to decant them into little bottles in order to make sure the awards are fair. But in that process of decanting them into little bottles, we go through so many plastic pipettes you wouldn't even imagine, you know. We go through so many little tiny bottles. It's all plastic. It's all waste. It all gets thrown away. So what would make an organization like ours able to be better sustainable are the bloody resources, you know, like bioplastics. So, and I mean, again, I can only speak for myself, but I imagine for a lot of the perfumers, it's similar, or the brands. Sorry, there's a ambulance. Can you hear it? It doesn't matter. Okay, good. Now you can hear it. It's gone. So yeah, so it's I think for a lot of brands, you just need the resources, you know, you need the right tools in order to make the decisions. And right now, it just there's things available, you know, but they're not quite yet at the level that looks professional. Again, getting back to that perception of professionalism, to make it really possible, I think, for people to adopt sustainable practices in terms of packaging, at least, means, you know, across the board. But, you know, it's just a question of time. I mean, I was talking at Eindhoven, the university at Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and I was talking in the new materials, I can't remember the department, but it was all a bunch of students that were working on bioplastics. And, you know, so, I mean, there's all these battalions of students that are being pumped out that are now working on this very issue. And soon enough, one of them is going to start a bioplastic pipette company. It's going to happen, you know. But triggering that signaling that there's an audience for that will make it faster, I think, you know. Yeah, it's sort of a catch-22. Like, if you don't have the tools, you can't do it. But unless you have the tools, or yeah, whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah.
That's definitely something that we've discussed.
Yes.
Like, just having access to the materials in order to have things that are biodegradable or are recyclable.
Super tricky. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, I mean, I give myself, you know, I mean, I have a team at the Institute that is like pretty progressive, you know, like I'm like the old dinosaur in this team, and I'm like making the offensive comments, and I'm like, what? But my point is, I mean, they're like taking the Institute to task all the time about this, and we're thinking about it a lot. But it just comes down to what I mean, there's some choices we can make, and there's some choices we just don't have the tools yet to make the right choices. So then what do? You know, you can either cease operations, which is really the responsible thing to do. I don't want to do that. So I'm just speaking for myself because I don't want to speak for other people. You know, I'm sure perfumers with brands would say something else, but yeah.
Well, we talk about that a lot ourselves. It's like, really, for us, it's about, you got to make the best decisions you can with the information that you have and the resources that you have. And like, that's the best we can do right now, you know?
Totally.
I mean, what additional tools or resources do you wish you had at the Institute?
Well, I mean, for one, it's, you know, I mean, I'm a nonprofit director, so I'm just like constantly answering emails, and, you know, and so a real resource is sort of a place where you can go and find like a centralized location to find out what's available, which I think you guys are, that's why I'm so excited about what you guys are doing, is because like you guys can do that, you know, there's that. And then, you know, look, we're in the perfume industry, right? It's not an industry famous for transparency. So I think some of that stuff, like, I mean, if you want to get into like raw materials, you know, people say, oh, this is sustainably harvested from blah, blah. Like, oh, do you know that? You don't know that. You know, you kind of have to go on faith. So in a way, you kind of need a sustainability watchdog, like an industry-wide sustainability watchdog. But then you're getting into the challenge of policing the industry, and that's no fun, you know? You don't want to be in that position. So yeah, but here's the good news. The good news is my experience with the fragrance houses is that, you know, there's this big sort of mythology around fragrance houses, and it ties into sort of perceptions of IFRA that, you know, people are putting things on the IFRA list so that they can make synthetic equivalents and make all the money and da-da-da. And, you know, I'm sure there's some truth to it, but really by and large, you know, everyone I've spoken to at the fragrance houses is saying like, look, like, we have a massive naturals divisions, you know, we're not in the business of destroying resources or getting rid of tools for our perfumers. Like they're in the same boat, you know what I mean? They're definitely, they have the same concerns as individuals, you know. It's just, then can the individuals make the corporation move? And that's where it gets really hard, I think, you know. They can all mean so well, but for some reason, something can't happen for legal reasons or whatever, you know. So there's hope there, but it's also like, you know, we need to show the appetite in order for that change to happen. And most consumers probably don't think about it so much. But again, that's what you guys can help with. No pressure.
Right.
Yeah, we wanted, that was part of it, was like informing perfumers, but also giving the public information.
Inform the public, totally. Really, totally. The public's where it's at, because the perfumers will be informed by what's selling. You know what I mean? Like, by and large, like if people are not buying things because of all that fucking plastic, I mean, the fragrance houses will have to adapt, and the perfume brands will have to adapt. So the public is really where it's at, I think.
One of the biggest, one of the biggest challenges that we face that you brought up is this idea of materials, you know, deciding when does it make sense to use a natural versus when does it make sense to use a synthetic version of that, you know. And it almost requires doing like a sustainability life cycle assessment that none of us have the education to do.
And a lot of the information isn't, but also a lot of that information isn't out there yet. Like we don't know,
Right.
you know, the long-term effects of ISO super because it only came out in 73, you know? So in fairness to you guys, like, you know, there's a lot of unknowns, you know? So it makes it extra challenging for you, I imagine.
Do you have any advice to us on how to get through to the big companies to get them to talk to us about this stuff?
God, if I had it, I'd use it. Well, the good news is that from my vantage point, the big companies are paying attention already. They're looking, you know, Givaudan has a woman in LA now who's responsible for like keeping an eye on the West Coast. I know that IFF is certainly interested on the West Coast because they've asked me. I don't think the others are any exceptions really. So, you know, not that the West Coast is the only place this is happening, but I do think that the West of the US is sort of leading the charge, you know? So I think my advice for all of us is just to keep doing the right thing, you know, as far as our own moral compass goes, and succeed. You know, we have to succeed. If we fail, if we all sit here and we're like, yeah, we're Echo, and we fail, then no one's going to pay any mind. So you got to succeed at it.
No pressure whatsoever.
Dude, tell me about it. Are you kidding me? I have so many gray hairs over there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no pressure at all. But I think we're all, I mean, that's where Mandy's advice comes in handy. Just stay small and do it right.
Yeah, it does seem like scaling is where a lot of people get into trouble, or that's when things start getting tricky, because it's all well and good to be a niche brand where we can, in some ways it's funny, the MOQs are against us at our level, you know, but in a way we have to be crafty and find sustainable solutions that work for us. But will those solutions work at scale? You know, like for instance, right now I'm changing my sample bottles because my sample bottles are glass, but they have that like little plastic like nubbin thing to keep it closed. Everyone has those, but I'm now moving to cork, and it's like I'm using a cork to cap it. Just because the plastic, I worry this tiny like nubbin of plastic is going to end up in the ocean. But what would that look like at scale? Can I really ship thousands of samples with like, you know, plugged with cork? Is that, I'm not sure, you know, what would that look like?
Super tricky, especially if you're going international, right? Because then EU has regulations about this stuff, you know,
Exactly.
And if not EU, like the distributors will be like, what am I going to do with this cork? It's leak, you know.
Right.
But that again, it comes down to like changing perceptions of luxury, you know, or changing perceptions of what perfume is about. Like if perfume is this perfectly spherical, like orb from outer space made out of plastic that never leaks and, you know, makes you sexy and whatever, then we're never going to win. You know, it's just going to be this maintaining this cycle of like fancy releases and plastic, whatever, you know. But, you know, if people can change what they expect out of perfumery, also their expectations of you guys, of the brands, you know, like this constant sampling thing. I mean, what the fuck, you know, how long can people keep this up? You know, I mean, I know, cause I've made those samples. It sucks, you know, and you're supposed to give these things away and they're tossing and people get them and once they put it in their drawer, they forget about it, you know, like that needs to change. I think, you know, just respecting the materiality of it and your time, man, you know? And that gets into like consumer culture and how things are just throwaway culture and sort of devaluing the products and the people that make them, and that's a bigger issue, you know, that needs to change.
Definitely.
So you were focusing on consumer education, and we're actually, since it's the Institute of Art and Olfaction, we were curious. You were mentioning that people were sending you emails and they were curious about sustainability and how it was being done and everything, but is that something that has come up in any of the workshops? That has anyone asked about it? Of course,
often.
like
Often.
Yeah. Do you think
you
would you be interested in like incorporating that sort of information into your courses as we gain resources?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh no, totally. I mean, if you guys are building the resources, believe me, I mean, you have a willing audience here, you know. The biggest challenge, like I said, I mean, no, people ask all the time. I mean, we are in, you know, I'm a Californian. I love California. I was born and raised here, but I mean, there is definitely a higher concern, I think, with these things here than elsewhere. So certainly, like 1 out of 3 people is like, "So is this sustainable?" And I'm like, I don't know, you know. Yeah, and some folks are like, okay, well, the unknown means I'm not going to consume it, and I'm like, right on, you're so responsible. Most people are just okay, So it would be definitely good for the institute at least to have the knowledge to know that we're making the right choices when we're buying stuff. But yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. I do rant, you guys. You can't stop me. Yeah, it's an
It's
unfortunate
great.
thing I've developed.
We appreciate it.
Oh.
Definitely. Well, is that all that we've got?
We were also potentially wondering, you answered that question too. You're very good. I don't think I have any more questions specific to our topic anyway.
I have a question for you guys. So what are you guys going to do next? Like, what's the plan with this? I'm excited.
Oh my gosh, there are so many facets.
I know.
We're trying to decide what to focus on first, really. Like the initial goal was start the conversation, but there's definitely like a longer vision in terms of like the resources we're able to provide and like what kind of access we can generate and things like that. And I'll let Marisa.
And also not eating your own lives alive, right? Because you can end up spending all your time on this, which is tough.
I would say that my wish list or my like dream and vision for the COSP is really constructing something like what we were describing, a resource for people to come and access information that would be more difficult for them to locate otherwise. All four of us and all of the other people that we're going to be bringing on to work with us have different contacts, have different experience in the industry. My own work with the ministry has given me access to glass manufacturers, and I know which ones are doing recycled glass, and I know what some of them are making the glass from, or what their goals are, and we could always ask them to expand on that. And so we can then forward these contacts or provide these contacts for people that are looking for recycled glass for their fragrance bottles at least. I would love for us to work with one of our suppliers and also houses and they're the distributors for oils from which they're buying, whether they're houses or other distributors, and create a comprehensive kind of system that on the product page you can say like this comes from this type of farm, or as far as we know this is the it's not a petrochemical, or or this vanilla comes from paper lignans, and is therefore a significantly more potentially more sustainable alternative to the petrochemical, for sure, sustainable alternative to extractions from the endangered species that these absolutes and tinctures and things come from. So we would I know that we would all we would love to have these things exist already for our own sake. But if they don't exist, then we got to figure out how to make them exist.
You guys got to do it. I mean, because so I'm teaming up with this group in the Netherlands that has developed or is developing a database structure for the Institute's open sourcing smell culture program. You know what I mean? Like, what if you guys used that too and created a database of stuff? I mean, it's tricky because then you have to do all the research, and God, if you get it wrong, like, oh my God, the headaches you're gonna have, but l'enfer, what is it? L'enfer c'est les autres, like hell is other people, like, believe me, man. But nevertheless, it's important. And if you sort of create this database or create a database of information, like, it's not that sexy, but it's actually really useful,
It is. We wanted just like if somebody was an indie perfumer or just gained interest, was in one of your courses and was like, I want to be a sustainable perfumer, we want them to have access to all of the resources to just do that. Like, we don't want that barrier to be there. Because I tried to start my company and I was like digging and just trying to find like stickers. And you're like, okay, what kind of ink? Okay, what kind of glue? Like, and then like you have like you're like just shipping packaging. And then you have to find that. And you're like, okay, what kind of ink? Like, what kind of tape? Like, there's all of these, like, little things. So to have access to that, to be like, okay, packaging, click. Okay, I know all of these people are FSC certified
Totally,
and it's
man.
compostable, and like just having that access would be a really beautiful way to just allow people to be sustainable when they desire to be. And there is also a demand for it at this point. Like,
Yeah.
and we can say we're as sustainable as possible, but you are held to a really high bar. Like, they'll be like, oh, because I came out of nonprofit and everyone's like, oh, have you been to the site? Because we worked internationally. And here it's like, oh, where did you get this vetiver? Have you met the person who picked it? And you're like, oh no.
You know, like how when you go to Whole Foods and there's like the fish and there's all the fish choices and there's like grades of like how sustainable that fish is. Like, I want that for sandalwood. I want a spectrum where it's like Australian plantation grown sandalwood, you're in the clear. And then on the whole other spectrum, it's like Mysore, don't touch it. And then like, and then maybe there's some synthetics on there too, where it's like, and then this synthetic by Biolands is fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Saskia. It was awesome to have you on.
Pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thank you so much.
Good luck with your work, you guys. It's important.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.